Hello and welcome to RootsDiscovery.com. I'm your host, Mick. Today we crack the case of John Cain of Bathurst, Gloucester, New Brunswick. Today's goal: locate the Scottish and Irish origins of one John Cain, born in Scotland and living in Bathurst. Family folklore. John Cain arrived in Canada with a brother possibly named Peter in the 1850s. Regarding his death, one rumor has it that John was murdered in his shop by an intruder, and the other rumor was that he was kicked in the head by a horse. Before we get started on the next record, I would just like to explain that the name Cain can be spelled in different ways. It can be spelled C-A-I-N, K-A-N-E, or K-E-A-N. And in this particular case, the spelling was K-E-A-N. And this is the 1861 census of Bathurst. What we have here is a John Cain from Scotland, 34 years of age, and is a blacksmith by trade. His wife, who's also 34 years of age, named Mary, is of Ireland. We arrive here at the 1871 census of Bathurst. John Cain, now 45, again of Scotland. However, it says he is of the Irish race. He is again a blacksmith. His wife Mary is now 5 years younger than himself at 40, again of Ireland. His oldest son is John, at 9 years old, born in New Brunswick. He has a daughter named Agnes, 7 years old, Margaret, 5, Richard, 4, and finally Catherine is 1 year of age. Moving forward, we find ourselves at the 1881 census of Bathurst. John Cain is now apparently deceased. His wife Mary is widowed and living with her sons John, Richard, and daughter Kate. Just where did this John Cain, a blacksmith, live in Bathurst? Here we're looking at a map of Bathurst Harbor. The arrow at the bottom is pointing to lots 10 and 11, and this is the approximate area where John Cain lived. So he is right off the waters of Bathurst Harbor. On the 25th of June, 1860, John Cain marries Mary Kelly at St. Famille in Bathurst. The witnesses were Martin Kelly, a brother to Mary Kelly, and Mary Fleming. Moving on to baptisms, we have on the 1st of April, 1862, the baptism for John Edward Cain, who was born on February 17th, to John Cain and Mary Kelly. The sponsors were Isidore Doucet and Mary Peter. On the 1st of September, 1863, Agnes Cain is baptized, having been born on the 30th of August. The sponsors were John Doucet and sister of Mary Kelly named Ellen Kelly. On the 25th of June, 1865, Margaret Cain is baptized at 9 weeks old. The spelling of the surname is spelled out as Kent, not Cain. The only sponsor listed is Louise Hatchie. I was not able to find son Richard's baptism at St. Famille. Moving on to the 25th of January, 1870, we have the baptism for sister Catherine. She was born on the previous 15th of November. Let's take notice of the fact that we have the parents listed as John Cain, and instead of it being Mary Kelly, she is listed for some reason as Mary Taylor. The sponsors were Andre Doucet and Agnes Hatchie. My next task was to locate John Cain living in Scotland. What I did was I went back to the 1851 census of Scotland and I was scrolling through different blacksmiths with that name, John Cain. Surprisingly, I only found one. And here he is here. This is the 1851 census of Port Glasgow. This John Cain, who is 24 years old, which matches the approximate birth year of the one living in Bathurst, was living with his mother, Agnes, who was born in Ireland. So this would explain why John said he was of the Irish race, although he was born in Scotland. This John was born in Campbelltown, Argyll. In 1851, John Cain was living with his mother, Agnes, on Bay Street in Port Glasgow. The body of water not far away here is the River Clyde. So just like in Bathurst, where John had settled not far away from Bathurst Harbor, presumably to work in his shop as a blacksmith, this John is working not far away from a body of water. I scoured through the 1841 census of Scotland, and I was unable to locate John or his mother Agnes. What I did was I then searched around the area where I did locate them in 1851 in Port Glasgow. They were not to be found there, but I located a William Cain, born around 1821 in Ireland. But he too was a blacksmith, just like John Cain. So I am wondering whether or not this is some sort of relative of John Cain who was found not far away from this William 10 years later. I would like to repeat that in 1841 I located a William Cain of Ireland, a blacksmith who was living on Scarlow Street on the top left-hand corner of this map. 10 years later, John Cain is living with his mother Agnes on Bay Street, which shows these two families were living close to the water, which was the River Clyde, and these two were both blacksmiths. At this point, a good question might be whether or not the Cain family came from a tradition of metalworking. What I attempted to do was look at the surrounding area of Port Glasgow and see if I could find other Cains that had some kind of metalworking skills. And here we have a Peter Cain in the 1841 census living on Union Street in Greenock, which is about 3 miles west. This particular Peter Cain was a farrier, again, who was a horseshoer, and these farriers did have metalworking skills. This Peter Cain was also born in Ireland. He had a wife named Catherine, a daughter Mary, and a daughter Anne. So we should look into perhaps if there are other records of this family. I was attempting to see if there was some kind of connection between John Cain the blacksmith and Peter Cain, who was living 3 miles west, because Peter Cain was a farrier and also, like John, had some blacksmithing skills. Well, this Peter Cain was said to be born in Antrim, Antrim, on the 1851 census of Greenock. But look at where his wife, Catherine, and daughter Margaret, who was listed as Mary in the previous census, was born. Just like John Cain, the blacksmith, they were born in Campbelltown. I do not think that that is an accident. So let's get a broader picture of what we learned about these different people that were living in both Port Glasgow and Greenock. Well, in 1841, I located a William Cain who was living on Scarlow Street in Port Glasgow. He was a blacksmith. 10 years later, not far away, we locate John Cain and his mother Agnes living on Bay Street. And of course, this John Cain was known to be a blacksmith. If we look a little west, and we're moving to the 1841 census, we had located Peter Cain and his wife, Catherine. They were located on Union Street. In the 1851 census, they are found on Inverkip Street, and this farrier, named Peter Cain, was stated to be from Antrim and County Antrim, but his wife, Catherine, and daughter Mary or Margaret were just like John Cain, born in Campbelltown. I was not able to locate the baptism for John Cain at Campbelltown. However, for the Church of Scotland, I did locate Peter Cain and his marriage to a Catherine Taylor, which took place on June 9th of 1827. Now, we see that he marries a Catherine Taylor, which leads me back to one of the baptisms for the children of John Cain in Bathurst. And for whatever reason, the mother's maiden name was listed as Mary Taylor. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of connection here. This is the baptism of daughter Mary, born to Peter Cain and his wife Catherine Taylor. She was born on the 22nd of November and baptized on December 4th of 1827. So this Mary was truly born as stated in Campbelltown. This is the 1861 census of Greenock in Gibbon Square. And here we have a Peter Canavan with his wife Ellen Cain and her mother Agnes Cain. This Agnes Cain is stated to have been 60 years of age, a charwoman, and was of Ireland. So if this was the mother of John Cain, then she didn't age from 1851 to 1861, which is probably just an error. But nonetheless, we have within the area Agnes Cain showing up just 3 miles west of where she was in 1851. Now let's think about what we have learned thus far in Scotland. John Cain was born 1826 or 1827 in Campbelltown in Argyll, Scotland, to an unknown father and mother Agnes, and would appear to have had a sister named Ellen, married Peter Canavan, born in Renfrewshire, circa 1839. In 1851, the family is living on Bay Street in Port Glasgow, Renfrewshire, Scotland. We cannot locate them in the 1841 census. Another blacksmith was in the 1841 census of Port Glasgow, just a short distance away on Scarlow Street, and he was named William Cain, born 1820-1821, and was of Ireland. Now, when I was looking for other metalworkers, I located a Peter Cain, a farrier, husband of Catherine Taylor, in both the 1841 and 1851 census records of Greenock, which was about 3 miles west of where both John Cain and his possible relative William Cain were living. This family is of great interest since they too came from Campbelltown. We have from family folklore that John's brother was a Peter and that they both went their separate ways after coming to Canada. If this Peter Cain is John's uncle, and he states that he was born in Antrim in County Antrim, then this is probably where John's father came from. I return us here to the baptism for Catherine, daughter of John Cain, and Mary Kelly. This took place on the 25th of January 1870 at St. Famille in Bathurst. We had discovered in Scotland that there was an apparent uncle to John Cain named Peter, and he had a wife named Catherine Taylor. Is it a coincidence that John Cain is listed here with a wife named Mary Taylor? Well, we know that his wife was Mary Kelly, not Mary Taylor. But my theory here is that perhaps when the child was getting baptized, maybe the sponsors were carrying the baby to the church, and they were the ones that were going to supply the information to the priest. Is it possible they asked John Cain for the mother's maiden name? Did he misconstrue what that was being asked and supply his own mother's maiden name? John Cain was born in Campbelltown around 1827. Him and his Irish mother, Agnes, settled in Port Glasgow, where John had set up a shop where he worked as a blacksmith. Also off the River Clyde to the west is a town called Greenock. His uncle Peter and his aunt Catherine Taylor also came from Campbelltown and settled in this town, of Greenock, which also had a high concentration of Irish people. So when John Cain settled in Bathurst, not far away from Bathurst Harbor, he was setting up another shop where he worked as a blacksmith, just like he had done in Port Glasgow, just off the River Clyde. If you would like help in finding your Irish roots, visit me at rootsdiscovery.com. My email is rootsdiscoverycontact@gmail.com. This has been your host, Mick, and I just cracked the case.